My wife is using our children's tuition fund to buy her lover's freedom. It's a sentence I never thought I'd have to even form in my head, let alone speak out loud. But here we are. And hey, if you're finding this, if you're listening to my story unfold, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Seriously, it helps get this out to more people who might be going through something similar. And if you're feeling this, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone you think needs to hear it, and drop a comment below. Let me know what you think, what you do, anything. Your engagement means the world, and honestly, right now, I need all the connection I can get. My name, for the purposes of this confessional, is Mark. I'm 42. Lived in this town, a pretty standard suburban sprawl outside of Denver, pretty much my whole life. Grew up here, went to the local community college, landed a decent job in logistics for a trucking company. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, puts food on the table, and frankly, I thought it was enough. More than enough, even. I have a wife, Sarah. We've been married for 15 years. 2 kids, Emily, she's 14, starting high school next year, already talking about colleges like she's a seasoned admissions counselor. And then there's Leo, he's 10, still into Legos and superheroes, the kind of kid who'd give you a hug just because. They're my world, you know? Everything I do, it's for them. Their future, their happiness, their security, that's always been the North Star for me. Sarah, she was the bright light. Met her at a friend's barbecue when we were both 27. She was vibrant, sharp, funny as hell. We just clicked. She worked in marketing, had this ambition I admired, this drive to be something more than just suburban mom. And I supported that. I encouraged it. I paid for her to go back to school for her MBA while I worked extra shifts. I handled the late nights, the school runs, the packed lunches, all of it, so she could climb that ladder. And she did. She got a great job making more money than I did eventually, and I was proud. So damn proud. We had this routine, this comfortable rhythm. Mornings were a scramble, evenings were dinner, homework, maybe a show on Netflix. Weekends were soccer practice, grocery runs, the occasional dinner with friends. It was good, solid. Boring, maybe, if you're looking for fireworks, but it was ours. The first crack, I didn't even see it as a crack. More like a hairline fracture, easily dismissed. It was about 6 months ago. Sarah started working later. A lot later. Her company was in a big merger, she said. Lots of late nights, weekends too. I bought it. I'd bring her dinner at the office sometimes or pick her up. She'd be exhausted, stressed, but usually she'd still have that spark. Only it started to feel different. She'd come home not just tired, but distant. Like she was physically present, but her mind was miles away.
She'd be on her phone constantly, even when we were supposed to be talking or watching TV. Quick glances, hushed conversations, always a quick work thing when I'd ask. I chalked it up to the merger, the pressure. I told myself, this is temporary, Mark. Just ride it out. She's doing this for us, for the kids. Then came the money. We have a joint account for household expenses, and then separate ones for our personal spending. We also had dedicated savings accounts for the kids. Emily's college fund, Leo's too. We'd been diligent, putting away a good chunk every month, especially since Emily was getting closer to college age. The tuition was going to be astronomical. We both knew that. We'd had conversations, serious ones, about the numbers, about potential loans, about making sacrifices. We agreed, no matter what, that money was untouchable. It was sacred. One evening, I was balancing our checkbook, just going over things. It's something I've always done, just to keep a handle on our finances. I noticed a few unusual withdrawals from our main savings account, the one where we kept the bulk of our investments, not the kids' specific funds. Small amounts at first, like a few $100s here and there. When I asked Sarah about it, she waved it off. Oh, just some unexpected bills, honey. Nothing to worry about. Her tone was a little too breezy, a little too dismissive. It pricked at me, but I didn't push. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then, about 2 months ago, I was looking for some old tax documents in Sarah's home office. Her office was usually immaculate, but this day, papers were spread out. I needed a specific file, and I was digging through a drawer. Tucked away, almost hidden, was a stack of bank statements. Not from our usual bank. These were from a smaller, out-of-state credit union. My stomach did a weird flip-flop. Why would we have statements from a bank we never used? I pulled them out, my hands shaking slightly. What I found, it was like a punch to the gut. They were regular, substantial transfers from our joint checking account, the one Sarah had primary access to for bills, to this new account, and then withdrawals, large ones, thousands of dollars at a time, and not just once or twice. These were consistent. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Was she investing somewhere? Starting a secret project? But the amounts were too big, too regular, and the secrecy, that was the real killer. I confronted her that night. I laid the statements on the dining room table. The kids were already in bed. The air in the house felt thick, suffocating. Sarah, what is this? I kept my voice even, but it felt like I was holding back a scream. She looked at the papers, her face draining of color. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. The silence stretched, agonizing. It's complicated, Mark, she finally whispered, her voice trembling. Complicated? Sarah, these are withdrawals from our money.
And from a bank I've never heard of. What's complicated about that? My voice was starting to rise. I could feel it. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was staring at the wood grain of the table. It's for someone I owe. Owe? What, Sarah? And why are you using our money? The anger was bubbling up now, hot and sharp. She finally looked at me, her eyes wide, pleading. He got into trouble, Mark. Serious trouble, and he needed help. A lot of help. And I promised him. You promised him? Who the hell is he, Sarah? And why would you promise him anything with our money? She took a deep breath, and then it spilled out, a torrent of words I still struggle to process. His name is Daniel. We knew each other from before you and I were together. We had a thing a long time ago, and he's made some really bad choices, got mixed up with some very dangerous people, and now they're threatening him. They want money, a lot of money, or they'll hurt him permanently. I just stared at her. Daniel, this ghost from her past, and she was using our money, our hard-earned money, to pay off some dangerous people for a man she'd slept with years ago? It was insane. It was a betrayal of everything we'd built. You're paying off a debt for your ex-boyfriend? Sarah, are you out of your mind? The words felt like stones being hurled. It's not like that, she insisted, her voice cracking. It's blackmail, Mark. They know things about him, and if they get released, it would ruin him, and I can't let that happen. And what about us, Sarah? What about our family? What about Emily's college fund? What about Leo's future? Did you think about any of that when you were handing over thousands of dollars to this Daniel? My voice was raw. I felt a cold dread creeping in. The money. The kids' money. That was the one line I thought no one, not even Sarah, would ever cross. Her eyes welled up with tears. I was going to tell you. I didn't know how. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could fix it before you found out. Handle it? Fix it? You've been draining our accounts for months. This isn't a quick fix, Sarah. This is a crisis. I stood up, pacing the living room, running my hands through my hair. The images flashing in my head were horrific. The thought of our kids' tuition money, the foundation for their futures, being siphoned off to some criminal element to keep a ghost quiet, it was sickening. I'm scared, Mark, she sobbed, finally breaking down. I'm so scared. Scared? You think I'm not scared? I stopped pacing, turning to face her. The look on her face wasn't just guilt. It was a kind of desperate panic. And it was then, in the stillness of our living room, surrounded by the comfortable normalcy that now felt like a mockery, that I asked the question that would shatter everything. How much, Sarah? How much have you given him?
She looked down at her hands, twisting them in her lap. She wouldn't answer. The silence was deafening, broken only by her ragged breaths. I tried again, my voice softer now, laced with a terrible dread. Sarah, please. How much? She finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and haunted. It's a lot, Mark. More than we have in the kids' accounts right now. My blood ran cold. The children's tuition fund. The dedicated savings. The absolute, non-negotiable safety net. You took from Emily's and Leo's funds? I could barely get the words out. She nodded. A small, defeated nod. They were demanding more. They said they'd go to the press, to social media, ruin him completely, and I couldn't let them. So I made some transfers. I felt a dizzying sense of unreality. This wasn't happening. This wasn't our life. This was a bad movie. The sheer audacity, the recklessness, it was beyond comprehension. And then, the most chilling realization hit me. If she had used that money earmarked for specific futures, it meant she had exhausted all other avenues. It meant she had been doing this for a long time, in secret. And now she was desperate. And then, a new wave of panic washed over me. If she was this deep, this desperate, what else was she capable of? What else was she hiding? I walked over to her, and for a moment, I just looked at her. The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, and I saw someone I didn't recognize. Someone who had gambled with our children's futures, with our family's security. For a man from her past, I felt a wave of nausea. When? Sarah, when did you take from their accounts? She squeezed her eyes shut. The last transfer, it was just last week. For a really big amount. They said it was the final payment. That he would be safe. That the debt was cleared. The final payment. I repeated, the words feeling hollow. And how much was this final payment, Sarah? She hesitated, then whispered, $60,000. $60,000. From the kids' tuition fund. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just cheating. This was financial ruin, masked as a desperate act of misguided loyalty. And the chilling thought that crept in then, the one that made my skin crawl and my gut twist with a cold, hard fear, was this. If this was the final payment, and she'd taken $60,000 from our children's future, what exactly was Daniel being freed from? And what if this final payment wasn't so final after all? What if the people she was paying weren't just criminals, but something far more dangerous? And what if they knew, even after the money, that Sarah was married, that she had a life, a family, and that maybe, just maybe, there was still more to be had? The silence in the room was no longer just uncomfortable. It was filled with a terrifying, unasked question.
And I had a sinking feeling that Sarah, in her desperate attempt to buy someone's freedom, had just bought our own damn ruin. The words $60,000 hung in the air, a toxic cloud I couldn't breathe through. 60,000. From Emily's college fund, from Leo's future. It was a sum so colossal, so unthinkable, that my brain struggled to process it. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the violation. It was about the sheer, unadulterated betrayal of trust. My trust, our children's trust. The foundation of our entire life, built on years of shared dreams and sacrifices, had just been leveled by a wrecking ball wielded by the person I thought I knew best. I stared at Sarah, her face a mask of misery and fear. Her lower lip trembled, her eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape route from the reality we were now trapped in. The woman who had once seemed so strong, so vibrant, now looked utterly broken. And a part of me, a tiny, poisoned part, felt a flicker of something that might have been satisfaction. Not at her pain, not really, but at the sheer, undeniable magnitude of her deception, which finally, undeniably, had shattered the illusion. The final payment, I repeated, the words flat, devoid of emotion. It was as if all the sound had been sucked out of the room. And you really believe them? You think this Daniel is free and clear now? She nodded, a jerky, uncertain movement. They said it was. They gave me a confirmation code, a sort of release number. They said if I ever tried to contact them again, or if Daniel ever surfaced in a way that drew attention, they'd know, and they'd make me regret it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They made it very clear. This was it. The end. My mind reeled. Confirmation code. Release number. This wasn't some small-time loan shark. This sounded organized, ruthless. And the threat, the implicit promise of retribution, hung heavy in the air. So, you paid them off, and now you're supposed to just forget about it? And so are we. I don't know, Mark, she choked out, tears streaming down her face again. I wanted it to be over. I wanted him to be safe, and I thought this would be the end of it. I was so stupid, so incredibly stupid. Stupid didn't even begin to cover it. Reckless, insane, utterly self-serving, those felt more appropriate. But the rage, the cold, white-hot rage that had been simmering beneath the surface, suddenly felt like it was being replaced by something else. A chilling, creeping fear. If this was the final payment, what did that mean for Daniel? What kind of trouble was he in that required $60,000 and a threat of permanent harm to resolve? And what if the people Sarah was dealing with weren't just hired muscle, but something far more sinister? What if they were the kind of people who didn't just let things go, even after the money?
What if, by paying them off, Sarah had inadvertently put a target on our backs? The thought was terrifying. I walked over to the window, looking out at the dark suburban street. Streetlights cast long shadows, the familiar houses looking alien, threatening. Our house, our perfect, ordinary house, now a potential stage for something terrible. So, what happens now, Sarah? You just pretend this never happened? We go back to normal? You pick up Emily from soccer practice? I help Leo with his homework? And we just never speak of the fact that you gambled away our children's futures for a man you haven't seen in 20 years? She didn't answer. She just sat there, weeping silently, a picture of abject despair. I wanted to scream, to rage, to smash something. But all I felt was a profound emptiness, a hollow space where my faith in her, in us, used to be. You know what the worst part is, Sarah? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It's not just the money. It's not even the betrayal. It's the fact that you thought you could get away with it, that you looked me in the eye day after day and lied, that you let me believe everything was fine while you were secretly orchestrating this financial assassination of our own family. I turned back to face her, the anger starting to resurface, hotter now, laced with a deep, burning humiliation. And this Daniel, this man you're so worried about, who is he, Sarah?
Really? Is he some tragic figure you feel you need to save? Or is he something else? Something more convenient? The question hung in the air, unsaid but potent. Was this all a smokescreen for something else? A way to siphon money for a life she wasn't living with me? The thought was a poison dart to my already shattered heart. She flinched at my words, her sobs quieting for a moment. He was important to me, Mark. A long time ago. He was my first love. And he made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. And these people, they prey on people like him. They saw an opportunity. And I couldn't stand by and watch them destroy him. Not after everything. Your first love? I scoffed, the sound harsh and disbelieving. And he's worth $60,000 of Emily and Leo's tuition? Worth our entire future? Sarah, you're not saving him, you're enabling him, and you're destroying us in the process. I ran my hand over my face, trying to bring some semblance of order to the chaos in my mind. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what to do. The immediate problem was the money, the $60,000 gone, and who knew how much more had been siphoned off before that. Our savings, our carefully built nest egg, was depleted. And the kids' future, that sacred trust, had been violated in the most profound way. But there was something else, something that gnawed at me. The confirmation code, the release number, the explicit threat of retaliation. This wasn't just about Daniel's past mistakes. It felt bigger.
More organized. And Sarah's fear, the raw, visceral terror I saw in her eyes, was palpable. It wasn't just guilt. It was genuine, bone-deep fear. Who are these people, Sarah? I demanded, my voice firm, cutting through her sobs. You have to tell me. Who did you give $60,000 to? Who threatened you? Who is Daniel supposed to be freed from? She finally looked up, her eyes wide with a terror that seemed to go beyond mere regret. I can't, Mark. I can't say their names. They said they'd know if I told anyone. They said they have eyes everywhere, but they monitor everything. Eyes everywhere. Sarah, this is insane. We have to go to the police. We have to report this. This is extortion. This is a crime. The words tumbled out, a desperate plea for logic in a situation that had spiraled into utter madness. She shook her head frantically. No, Mark, no. They warned me. They said if we went to the authorities, it would be worse, much worse, for Daniel and for us. They said they would make examples. They said they'd make sure we understood the consequences of crossing them. She shivered, pulling her knees to her chest. They said they knew about you, about the kids. They said they knew where we lived. My blood turned to ice. They knew about us. They knew about the children. This wasn't just about Sarah's misguided loyalty to an old flame. This was about a dangerous organization that had infiltrated her life, extorted her, and now, potentially, us. The thought of them watching us, of them knowing our routines, our vulnerabilities, it was a primal fear I'd never experienced before. It was the fear of a predator stalking its prey. This is not happening, I stammered, my hands starting to tremble. I felt a dizzying sense of panic rising, a suffocating wave of dread. They can't know where we live. How would they? I don't know, she cried, her voice rising in a frantic pitch. I don't know how they do things, Mark. All I know is they know, and they were very specific. They described our house. They mentioned Emily's bike in the garage. They said they saw Leo playing in the yard last week. They know everything. The image of Leo, my innocent son, playing in our backyard, oblivious to the unseen eyes watching him, sent a wave of pure adrenaline through me. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about protection. It was about ensuring the safety of my children. What did they say, Sarah? Exactly what did they say about us? My voice was tight, controlled, but the tremor was undeniable.
I needed every detail, no matter how horrifying. She took a shaky breath, her eyes squeezed shut as if reliving the terrifying conversation. They said that Daniel owed them a debt that was substantial and that he couldn't pay, so they had to find another way, and they found me. They said they knew I was married, that I had a comfortable life,
and that I had valuable assets. She opened her eyes, and I saw a flicker of something there. Not just fear, but a dawning realization of the enormity of her mistake. They said that $60,000 was just a down payment, that Daniel was now effectively in their service, and that his future and ours was now connected. A down payment. Connected. The words reverberated in my head, each one a hammer blow. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Sarah hadn't bought Daniel's freedom. She'd bought him a new kind of servitude, and in doing so, she dragged us all into a nightmare. The people she was dealing with weren't just criminals. They were orchestrating something far more complex, far more insidious. And Daniel was now their pawn, a pawn that had cost us our savings and potentially our safety. In their service. I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. What does that even mean, Sarah? What have you gotten us into? She buried her face in her hands again, her body racked with sobs. I don't know, Mark. I don't know anything anymore. I was just trying to protect him. I never meant for any of this to happen, I swear. I looked at her, this woman I had loved, this woman who had lied to me, betrayed me, and put our children in danger. The anger was still there, a molten core in my gut, but it was now tinged with a bone-chilling fear. The fear for my children, the fear of the unknown, the fear that Sarah, in her desperate attempt to save one man, had condemned us all. I walked out of the living room, into the kitchen, my mind racing. I needed to think. I needed to act. The police were out of the question, at least for now. The threats were too specific, too terrifying. But I couldn't just sit here and do nothing. My kids were my priority, their safety, their future. And now it seemed their future was inextricably linked to some dangerous people and a man from Sarah's past. I opened the pantry, my hand hovering over a bottle of bourbon. I rarely drank, but tonight felt like a night for it. As I reached for the bottle, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text message from an unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. I knew with a sickening certainty that this was not going to be good. I picked it up, my fingers fumbling slightly. The message was short, stark, and it chilled me to the bone. Your wife made a wise decision. Daniel is now in our care. Remember, silence is golden. We'll be in touch. The next payment is due in 2 weeks. Consider this a friendly reminder. I dropped the phone. It clattered on the tiled floor, the screen momentarily displaying the terrifying message before going dark. 2 weeks, another payment, and Daniel is now in our care. That wasn't freedom. That was a cage I had unknowingly helped build. I stood there, frozen, the weight of what I'd just read crushing me.
My wife, Sarah, the mother of my children, had not only gambled away their education fund, but had now apparently entered into some sort of ongoing arrangement with a dangerous organization, all to protect a ghost from her past. And now, it seemed, I was implicated too. The comforting facade of our suburban life had not just cracked, it had imploded, leaving me standing in the wreckage, staring into an abyss of unknown dangers and unanswered questions, with a ticking clock counting down to another impossible demand. What in God's name was I going to do? The bourbon bottle sat heavy in my hand, the cool glass a stark contrast to the heat building in my chest. 2 weeks. The words echoed in my head, a taunting countdown to what? Another demand? Another violation? The message was a digital fingerprint, a chilling confirmation that this wasn't some fever dream, some hallucination brought on by Sarah's confession. This was real. This was happening to us. Our care. The euphemism was sickening. It wasn't care, it was control.
Daniel, my wife's past, was now a black hole sucking our present and future into its maw. I walked back into the living room. Sarah was still there, a statue of despair on the couch, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders still shaking with silent sobs. The scene was almost too much to bear, a tableau of domestic devastation. My anger, which had been a roaring inferno, had been doused by a wave of icy fear. The kids. I had to think about the kids. Leo, his laughter in the yard, oblivious. Emily, her excited chatter about college applications, about her future. Their innocence felt like a fragile shield against the storm gathering around us. "Sarah," I said, my voice rough, strained. She flinched, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. They'd preyed on Sarah's guilt, her lingering feelings for an old flame, and then, using Daniel as leverage, they'd ensnared her, and by extension, us. "What do we do, Mark?" The question was a plea, a desperate cry for guidance from the man she had lied to, betrayed, and now, in a way, endangered. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had built a life with, the mother of my children, her face etched with a misery so profound it was almost unbearable. The anger was still there, a dull ache, but it was now a complex tapestry woven with fear, confusion, and a strange, dawning sense of responsibility. I couldn't just abandon her, not with the kids. We were in this, all of us, whether I wanted to be or not. "We don't go to the police," I said, the words firm, decisive. "Not yet. They warned us. They know where we live. They know about the kids. That's too much leverage for them. We'd be signing our own death warrants, or worse, the kids." Her eyes widened, a fresh wave of terror washing over her. "But what then? We just wait? Wait for them to ask for more?" "We figure out who they are," I said, my mind already working, sifting through the fragments of information. "We figure out who Daniel is, what he did, and why these people are so invested in him, and we try to understand what 'in their service' means. Because $60,000 and a threat isn't the endgame, it's just the start." I stood up, pacing the living room, the worn carpet feeling strangely solid beneath my feet. The illusion of control had been shattered, but maybe, just maybe, there was a way to reclaim some semblance of it. "We need to be smart, Sarah. We need to be careful. No more impulsive decisions, no more secrets. Everything, from this moment on, we deal with together, and we don't tell anyone, not our families, not our friends, no one. This stays between us." She nodded, her gaze fixed on my face, searching for reassurance, for strength. She found it, perhaps, in the grim determination that had settled over me. I was no longer just a husband or a father. I was a protector, a strategist, thrust into a war I never signed up for. "Daniel," I said, stopping in front of her, "when was the last time you spoke to him? Really spoke to him?" She hesitated, then whispered, "About 6 months ago. He called. He was desperate. Said he was in trouble. Bad trouble. He said he needed help. I told him I couldn't, that we had our own bills, our own life. He got angry. He said I owed him. Said I owed him for the past. And then he hung up." Her voice cracked. "I thought that was it. I blocked his number. I didn't hear from him again until they contacted me." "They contacted you," I repeated, the pieces clicking into place with a sickening finality. "So they knew about Daniel. They knew he was someone you might be susceptible to helping, and they used that. They knew you wouldn't go to the police." They leveraged your guilt, your history with him, and they got what they wanted, $60,000. "But how did they find me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "How did they know I was married? How did they know about Emily and Leo?" That was the chilling part, the part that spoke of a sophisticated, deeply embedded operation. "That's what we need to figure out, Sarah. They didn't just pick a name out of a hat. They did their homework. They've been watching us, watching you. They probably have been for a while." The thought sent a fresh shiver down my spine. The mundane moments of our lives, my commute to work, Sarah grocery shopping, the kids playing in the yard, all observed, cataloged. "I don't understand," she murmured, shaking her head. "Why Daniel? Why him? What is he to them?"
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I said, the irony of the phrase not lost on me, given the sum involved. Is he a courier, a mule, a pawn in their games? Or is he something more personal? Did he owe them money? Or did he do something for them that went wrong? I walked to the window again, looking out at the silent houses, the familiar street suddenly feeling like a carefully constructed set, designed to lull us into a false sense of security. We need to find out who Daniel is, Sarah. His full name, where he lived, who his friends were, everything. And we need to do it without raising any red flags. No Googling Daniel's past that they might be monitoring. No calls to old mutual friends that could tip them off. I don't remember his last name, she confessed, her voice laced with shame. We were young. It was so long ago. I only remember Daniel, and maybe a nickname? A nickname. Another piece of the puzzle, frustratingly vague. Thanks, Sarah. Every detail. Anything. Was he involved in anything illicit? Anything that might have put him in this kind of debt? She closed her eyes, concentrating, her brow furrowed. He had a gambling problem. He was always chasing the next big win. He'd borrow money from anyone. I remember he once owed some pretty rough guys money. He was terrified. He said they were scary. They had a reputation. He never told me their names, but I always felt like he was running from something. Always, even back then. Gambling. That explained the debt. That explained the predatory nature of the organization. They preyed on the desperate, the addicted, the vulnerable. And Sarah, with her lingering affection and guilt, was the perfect target. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. Okay, we can work with that. We'll start with what we have. We'll build a profile, and we'll be careful, every step of the way. The immediate fear began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to let this destroy my family. I wasn't going to let these people win. I looked at Sarah, her face pale and drawn in the dim light. You made a mistake, Sarah. A huge, terrifying mistake.
But we're going to deal with it. Together. We're going to find a way through this. For the kids. For ourselves. The days that followed were a blur of quiet desperation and calculated investigation. We sifted through old boxes in the attic, looking for anything that might hold a clue. Old yearbooks, letters, faded photographs. Sarah, her face a mask of guilt and concentration, would point to a blurry figure in the background of a party photo, a fleeting memory sparked by a familiar smile. That might be him, she'd murmur, or he used to hang out with a guy named Mikey, always wore a silver chain. I, meanwhile, was conducting my own, more discreet inquiries. I started with subtle questions at work, casual conversations with friends who might have connections, listening for whispers, for any mention of unusual financial dealings or organized crime activity in the city. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack, a needle that was actively trying to avoid being found. The constant fear of being watched, of making a wrong move, was a gnawing anxiety that never quite left me. Every car that slowed down on our street, every unfamiliar face in the grocery store, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. Sarah, to her credit, threw herself into the task with a fierce determination. The initial shock and paralyzing fear had morphed into a desperate resolve. She combed through her old digital archives, old email accounts, social media profiles that hadn't been accessed in years. We were piecing together fragments of a life that had been deliberately obscured, a past that had come back to haunt us with a vengeance. We learned Daniel's last name. It was Miller, Daniel Miller, a name that sounded utterly innocuous, yet was now synonymous with our deepest fears. Sarah found an old address for him, a cheap apartment complex on the outskirts of town. We drove by it one afternoon, a nondescript building with peeling paint and a pervasive sense of decay. It felt like a shrine to desperation. We didn't go in, we didn't dare. We just observed, looking for any sign, any anomaly. The next payment loomed, a constant suffocating pressure. We didn't have another $60,000. We didn't even have $600. Sarah's confession had revealed that the initial payment had nearly wiped out our accessible savings, the money earmarked for Emily's freshman year and Leo's future schooling. We were on the brink of financial ruin, and now, it seemed, we were on the brink of something far worse. One evening, as Sarah was scrolling through an old email account, she let out a gasp. "Mark, look at this." I hurried over to her. It was an email from years ago, a fragmented conversation between Sarah and Daniel. He was complaining about someone who was squeezing him dry. He mentioned a name, a single chilling word. The Syndicate. The Syndicate, I repeated, my voice low.
It sounded like something out of a bad movie, but the terror in Sarah's eyes told me this was no fiction. Did he mention what they did? What they wanted? Just that they were ruthless, that they had ways of collecting debts that were unpleasant. He said he owed them a lot, and they weren't letting him off. The name resonating with a dark familiarity I couldn't quite place. It was the kind of name that whispered of a shadowy network of clandestine operations, of a reach that extended far beyond petty crime. It was the kind of organization that didn't just collect debts, they owned people. The pieces were slowly, agonizingly fitting together. Daniel, a gambler, deep in debt to a ruthless organization known as the Syndicate. Sarah, a lingering attachment, guilt-ridden, a target they could exploit. $60,000, a down payment to buy him a little time or to secure his immediate placement into their operations. And now they were coming for more, and we were caught in their web. The next 2 weeks were a tense standoff. We lived with a constant knot of anxiety in our stomachs. We avoided unnecessary outings. We watched every interaction. We spoke in hushed tones. I found myself constantly scanning the perimeter of our house, my mind conjuring images of unseen watchers, of silent threats. I even bought a discreet security system, the installation feeling like an admission of defeat, a confirmation that our sanctuary was no longer safe. Sarah was a wreck. Sleep offered little respite. She'd wake up in cold sweats, whispering Daniel's name, her face contorted with a guilt that seemed to have become a permanent fixture. I held her, comforting her as best I could, even though a part of me still seethed with resentment. But the overwhelming fear for our children had a way of eclipsing everything else. Then, exactly 2 weeks later, the call came. Not a text this time, a voice on the phone, deep, guttural, laced with a chilling authority. It was the same voice from the text message, I was sure of it. "Mark," the voice said, and my blood ran cold. They knew my name. They knew my name. "Your wife has been very cooperative. We appreciate that. But we require the next installment, $10,000, within 48 hours. This is non-negotiable." My mind raced. 10,000? That was a pittance compared to the original sum, but it was still a fortune we didn't have. "And Daniel?" I managed to choke out, my voice tight with fear. "What about Daniel? Is he safe?" A low chuckle, devoid of humor, emanated from the phone. "Daniel is employed. He's fulfilling his obligations. He's being productive. You can thank your wife for his continued employment." Employed, I repeated, the word a hollow echo. It was a cage.
They had Daniel in a cage, and they were using us to keep him there. What happens if we don't have the money, exactly? The voice dropped, becoming dangerously soft. You don't want to find out, Mark. Trust me. The syndicate has very long arms, and they do not forget, especially when a debt remains unpaid. Think of your children. Think of their bright futures. You wouldn't want anything to disrupt that, would you? The veiled threat hung in the air, a suffocating miasma. My children. They were using my children as leverage. A cold fury, primal and absolute, surged through me. This was beyond anything I could have imagined. This wasn't just about Sarah's mistake anymore. This was a direct assault on my family, on my very existence as a protector. "We'll get it," I said, my voice shaking, but with a steely edge that surprised even myself. "We'll get the money. Just give us the 48 hours. "Very good, Mark," the voice purred. 48 hours. Don't disappoint us." The line went dead. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling violently. Sarah was staring at me, her face white with terror. "Who was it? What did they want?" "They want $10,000, I said, my voice flat, "in 2 days, and they reminded me about the kids." She let out a strangled cry, burying her face in her hands. "We can't get $10,000, Mark. We don't have it. We'll lose everything." "We already have," I said, the words heavy with a terrible finality. "But we're not going to lose the kids. We're not going to let these people win. I don't know how yet, but we will find a way." I walked over to the window,
looking out at the darkening sky. The suburban dream, the peaceful facade, had crumbled, revealing the ugly, dangerous reality lurking beneath. We were trapped, but trapped people, I thought, sometimes found a way to fight back. And I was going to fight. For my children, for whatever remained of our shattered life. The fear was still there, a cold, gnawing presence. But beneath it, something else was stirring. A desperate, defiant resolve. A father's rage. A husband's grim determination. Whatever it took, I would protect my family, even if it meant stepping into the abyss myself. The phone lay silent on the counter, a harbinger of more darkness. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't pure terror. It was the first spark of a fight.